He thought firing her would be easy. A quiet black employee, terminated without warning, without cause. But what he didn't know was that someone had been watching, and when his record came under the spotlight, the real story began. One that would shake the company from the top down. Because this time, silence didn't mean weakness. It meant evidence. The meeting lasted less than 4 minutes. Danielle Rhodes sat across from Mark Ellis, her back straight, hands folded calmly in her lap. She had no idea why she'd been called in. No emails, no prior discussions, just a calendar invites labeled update. Mark didn't look up from his screen at first. When he did, his expression was practiced, tight-lipped, impatient, like he had somewhere better to be. He slid a sealed envelope across the desk without making eye contact. "We're letting you go," he said flatly. Danielle blinked. "I'm sorry, it's a restructure," Mark added, tapping his pen twice against the desk. "Budget cuts. Nothing personal." She stared at him. Her mind flicked through recent performance reviews. All positive. Deadlines met. Projects delivered early. Last month's team lead commendation still pinned to the board. "This doesn't make sense," she said, voice even. Mark finally looked up, his eyes cold. "It's final. HR will send the exit documents. Take what time you need." Danielle reached for the envelope, her fingers trembling slightly before she steadied them. She stood slowly, her dignity intact, even if the room seemed to tilt under her feet. Behind her, Mark was already checking his phone. She walked out without a word. In the hallway, no one looked at her. The open plan office, once buzzing with chatter and keyboard clicks, felt suddenly distant. Faces turned slightly, then away. A few glanced up from behind monitors, but none held eye contact. Not after what they'd seen. Danielle made it to her desk. Her inbox was already locked. A box had been placed on her chair. Someone had anticipated this. She began packing, quietly, deliberately, a small succulent from her windowsill, her favorite mug, a notebook filled with diagrams, annotations, ideas. She paused at a photo, her niece grinning at last year's science fair. "Everything okay?" a voice asked, low and hesitant. It was Aaron from IT, young, awkward, always polite. She nodded. Yeah. He didn't believe her, but he didn't push. By the time she reached the elevators, the box felt heavier than it should have. Each step echoed through the lobby like a closing door. As she stepped outside, the Dallas sun hit her face, warm and blinding. She took a deep breath. She didn't cry. Not yet. Danielle didn't know why she'd been targeted. Not exactly, but she knew enough to recognize what no one would say aloud. She'd seen the patterns. Who got promoted? Who got second chances? Who got restructured? And who didn't? Inside, Mark Ellis leaned back in his chair, satisfied. Another problem, resolved. But he didn't see the security camera above the door. Didn't realize what Danielle had quietly forwarded to her personal email 2 weeks earlier. Didn't know someone else had been watching and documenting everything. Because this story wasn't ending. It was just beginning. The sun glared off the mirrored glass of the building as Danielle stepped onto the sidewalk, box in arms, the lobby door sliding shut behind her with a hiss that felt far too final. She didn't look back. Inside the box were the small pieces of her time there. Mug, notebooks, charger, one clipped photo of her niece. On top lay the envelope Mark had handed her without emotion, still sealed. She already knew what it said. Legal phrases, sanitized language, words like restructure, realignment, not a reflection of your performance, and the one word it wouldn't say, truth. People passed her, some on phones, others rushing to lunch meetings, but no one stopped. No one from the office came after her. The silence was deliberate. It always was. Danielle walked to the edge of the parking structure and leaned against the low stone wall, setting the box down beside her. Her hands tightened around the railing. The heat from the concrete radiated through her blouse, but she didn't move. The burn was grounding. She felt the pressure rising behind her eyes, hot, bitter, but she refused to let it fall. They would not get her tears. Not the boardroom that overlooked her. Not the HR director, who had said nothing as Mark recited his speech. Not the receptionist who had handed her the box like it was routine, like she'd just clocked out early. Danielle had worked too hard, stayed too late, kept too quiet. She'd watched others rise with half her skill, and twice her privilege. She'd answered emails on Sundays, offered solutions in meetings where no one remembered her name afterward. And now she was gone, erased in a sentence. She reached for her phone, not even sure who to call. Her mom would be furious. Her sister would cry. Neither would help right now. A new email notification blinked at the top of her screen. From HR, your final paycheck has been processed. Exit interview not required. Not required. That stung more than she expected. Danielle closed the email and opened her notes app instead. She began typing. Not feelings. Facts. Dates. Names. Instances that once seemed too subtle to report. Like the executive who praised her ideas only to repeat them as his own. Or the time Mark introduced her to a client as support staff. The meetings she was excluded from. The way he always said her name with a smirk. Danielle, like a joke only he understood. It had all added up. Slowly, quietly, until today, proving it felt like chasing smoke. But now she didn't just want clarity, she wanted truth. She picked up the box, stood tall, and crossed the street toward her car. They had erased her from the office, but they hadn't silenced her. Not yet. The door to the executive suite clicked shut behind him, muffling the sound of laughter that spilled from inside. Mark Ellis tossed his jacket over the back of a chair and loosened his tie like a man who'd just handled something beneath him. Another one down, he said, grinning as he poured himself a glass of sparkling water from the carafe near the window. That Rhodes girl. She was getting too stiff. Kyle, the head of finance, raised an eyebrow. Stiff, Mark shrugged. You know the type, always quiet, always watching. Makes the rest of the team uncomfortable. And let's be honest, she never really fit the culture here. Laughter followed, easy, entitled, rehearsed. The kind of laugh that only came from men who assumed no one was listening, but someone was. Monica Green sat at her desk just down the hall, pretending to sort onboarding paperwork. The executive suite's glass walls didn't carry sound, but the hallway vents did. She'd learned that 2 months into her HR role, she never meant to eavesdrop. It just happened when voices got careless. This wasn't the first time she'd heard something that made her pause, but it was the first time it felt this direct. I mean, I could practically hear her clutching her pearls every time someone made a joke. Mark continued, you can't have that kind of energy dragging the team down. These people forget they're replaceable. Kyle chuckled. So, who's next? Mark smirked. We'll see. Depends who steps out of line. Monica's hand froze above the keyboard. A chill crawled across her shoulders, despite the hum of the warm office. She glanced at the HR handbook on her shelf. All the policies, the procedures, the stated commitment to inclusion. She knew what was written in those pages. She also knew what wasn't being followed. She clicked open a blank document on her screen. No header, no name, just the date. And then she started typing. Mark Ellis, 11:07 a.m. She never really fit the culture. People forget they're replaceable. It wasn't much, but it was something. She'd heard rumors before about the way terminations happened, about the kinds of employees who didn't last, mostly women, mostly people of color. But rumors don't hold weight, records do. So Monica started keeping them, quietly, carefully. Emails flagged and forwarded to a locked folder. Names. Timelines. Words that had been said behind closed doors by people too confident to consider the consequences. She didn't know Danielle Rhodes, had only seen her in passing. But in that moment, she made a choice. This wasn't just about one firing. It was about the pattern she could no longer ignore. And if no one else was going to do something about it, she would. The first name that came to mind was Jordan Lynn. He'd been let go last winter. Performance issues, they'd said. But Danielle remembered the day he left. No write-up, no final warning, just a pale face and a stunned expression as he walked out with a single folder under his arm. Then there was Aisha Grant. Brilliant, driven, always the last to leave the office. She had trained 2 new hires who got promoted above her. When she asked about advancement, they said she was too intense. A month later she was gone. And Marcus Hayes, its specialist, always fixing things before they broke. He vanished after a team restructure. No announcement. Just gone. Danielle sat at her kitchen table, laptop open, coffee gone, cold beside her. The email draft blinked on her screen. Her fingers hovered above the keyboard, unsure. She didn't want to stir drama, didn't want to reach where she wasn't wanted, but something deeper pushed her forward. She typed, subject, just reaching out. Hi Jordan. I know it's been a while since we worked together. I hope you're well. I was recently let go from the company, and have some concerns about the way things were handled. I wanted to ask, if you're comfortable, did you feel your departure was fair? She reread it 3 times before hitting send. Then she emailed Aisha, then Marcus, then 2 others. Within a day, replies trickled in. Jordan's was short but heavy. Honestly, I never understood it. No warning, no explanation. I'd asked a question in a meeting that made someone uncomfortable. That's all I can guess. Aisha replied with 3 paragraphs. I'm glad you reached out. I've been carrying this for a while. I felt targeted, like I didn't belong. The feedback was vague. They used not a cultural fit more than once. Marcus's email hit the hardest. You're not crazy. I've talked to a few others. We noticed the pattern too. Quiet firings. Always the same kind of people. It wasn't random. Danielle sat back, the weight of it all pressing into her chest. This wasn't about a bad day, or a misunderstanding. This was something baked in. She opened a spreadsheet. Names, dates, roles, reasons given, if any. It was crude at first, but the more she added, the clearer it became. The terminations weren't isolated. They were threaded through the years like an invisible script, targeting those who didn't fit. Danielle closed her eyes for a moment. She had spent so much time questioning herself, wondering if she'd done something wrong, but now she saw the bigger picture. This wasn't personal. It was systemic, and if no one else had connected the paper trail, she would. The email came at 2:17 a.m. No subject, no name. Just a single line. You're not alone. I have information. Can we talk off record? Danielle stared at the screen in the dark, her living room lit only by the pale blue glow of her laptop. Her heart ticked faster, not from fear, but from something else. Hope, she replied cautiously. Created a new encrypted email. Agreed to a video call under the condition it stayed anonymous. The next night, just after midnight, the screen blinked to life. The face that appeared wore large glasses and anxiety, like a second skin. I'm Monica, she said softly. HR assistant. I've seen things, and I kept quiet too long. Danielle didn't speak right away. She didn't need to. Her silence was steady, inviting. The kind of quiet that told Monica she was safe. They fired you with no write-up, no review? Monica asked. Danielle nodded once. That's what I thought. Monica exhaled. They've done this before. I've seen the records. Dozens. And every time, the reason sounds clean on paper, but the patterns, they aren't. She leaned in, voice trembling. There are emails. From Mark. He jokes about quotas, calls it cultural calibration. I didn't know what to do when I first saw it. Then they made some of the complaints disappear. Real complaints. HR reports that should have gone to upper management were rerouted, quietly deleted, or buried. Danielle felt a slow rising heat in her chest. Anger, yes, but also validation. It was real. All of it. Someone else had seen it too. Why now? She asked. Monica's voice cracked. Because I couldn't sleep after your termination. It was too clean, too cold. And the way Mark smiled after it made me sick. I don't want to be part of this anymore. I want it to stop. She reached off screen and held up a flash drive. I've saved copies, files, logs, even the complaints they tried to erase. I've been building a folder, piece by piece. I didn't know who to trust until I saw your name. Danielle swallowed hard. This could cost you everything, she said. Monica nodded. I know, but if I stay quiet, I'm complicit. For a moment, neither of them said anything. Just 2 women, strangers only days before, linked by the same wound and the same quiet fire. Danielle finally spoke. Then let's make it count. They began that night. Files transferred. Notes compared. A web of data and truth slowly woven between them. It was delicate, dangerous, but it was enough to start. Because now, Danielle didn't just have suspicions. She had a whistleblower. And together they weren't just collecting evidence, they were building a reckoning. The folder grew slowly, quietly. What started as a few screenshots became a thick digital archive. Danielle named it Dossier_1, though they both knew it would be the only one they'd need if done right. Inside, 5 years of data, emails laced with language, too polished to be criminal, but too consistent to be innocent. Terms like personality, misalignment, and cultural friction, attached to names that all looked like hers. Danielle cross-referenced terminations with company rosters. Monica filled in gaps from memory and records she'd backed up before they vanished from the system. They built a spreadsheet, columns for race, gender, role, tenure, exit reason, and the pattern became impossible to ignore. 78 terminations over 5 years. 59 were employees of color. 41 were women. The language used in each dismissal file read like copy-paste justification, stripped of detail, but full of judgment. Danielle stared at the chart one night, hands clenched at her sides. It wasn't just her. It never had been. Monica sent over chat transcripts, executives laughing about diversity quotas, mocking accent-heavy names in candidate pools. There were time-stamped memos, performance reviews rewritten by managers to justify firings. And then there were the complaints, dozens of them, subjected to racial microaggressions by direct supervisor, asked to change hairstyle to appear more professional, excluded from client meetings without reason. Each had been marked resolved internally. Most had no follow-up. Some had vanished entirely. "I didn't think anyone would believe me," Monica said one night. "But now I see, they made it look normal, routine, like policy." "No," Danielle replied quietly. "They made it look like it was our fault." They interviewed former employees, under confidentiality, Jordan, Aisha, Marcus, and others. Each had a story that followed the same arc: hired with promise, ignored, sidelined, erased. Danielle compiled the interviews, edited out names, and formatted them into a single PDF. She titled it Testimonies. By the third week, the dossier held over 200 pages. Danielle created a contents page. Monica fact-checked every line. It was airtight. But what made it powerful wasn't just the numbers. It was the humanity behind them. The tired voices, the unfinished careers, the people who still second-guessed themselves long after their badge access was cut. Danielle added a final document, her own story. Simple, honest, no embellishment. Just what happened, how it felt, and why she wouldn't stay silent. Then she saved everything to 3 encrypted drives. One for herself, one for Monica, one for the lawyer. She looked at the screen. No blinking cursor, no noise. Just proof. It wasn't a few bad decisions. It wasn't poor communication. It was a system, and it was time to break it. The boardroom was silent, the kind of silence that comes just before something erupts. Long mahogany table, leather chairs, bottled water sweating against polished wood. A projector screen lowered at one end. Mark Ellis walked in like he owned the air. Charcoal suit, confident stride, the practice smirk he wore whenever HR called a meeting. He barely acknowledged the board members, tossing a glance toward the 2 legal reps seated at the far side. Routine, he thought. Probably about the new policy changes. Maybe another performance audit. He didn't see Danielle until he reached his chair. She was seated calmly near the window. No box in hand, no badge clipped to her blouse. Just stillness, and something behind her eyes that made him pause. "Danielle," he said, blinking. "This isn't sit," said one of the lawyers. Her tone didn't rise, but it landed like a weight. Mark lowered himself slowly into the seat. Across the table, the chairman cleared his throat. "This is not a performance meeting," he said. "It's an evidentiary review initiated by a formal legal inquiry. We suggest you listen." The lights dimmed. The projector lit up. Slide 1. Firing patterns at Ellis Group. 2018 to present. Mark's smile faltered. As charts appeared, bar graphs, pie slices, percentages, the room began to shift. Board members leaned in. Side conversations stopped. Then came the testimonials. Names redacted. Voices, some cracking, some firm. "I was told I didn't fit the image the company wanted to project. They said I was too opinionated. I was never asked for my opinion. My reviews were strong, until I reported my manager. Then I was gone. Each line hit like a slow rising tide. Next, emails. Internal jokes. She's one of the diversity hires, right? A message from Mark. Let's not waste time interviewing another DEI project. He opened his mouth to speak, but the attorney held up a hand. There's more. The folder slid across the table. Monica's notes. Danielle's timeline. A spreadsheet so detailed it looked like a forensic audit. This is absurd. Mark finally snapped. This is revenge. She was terminated for cause. No. The chairman interrupted. She wasn't. Silence. Danielle hadn't said a word. She didn't need to. Her presence was louder than anything Mark could say. The lead counsel stood. You may step out, Mr. Ellis. The board will deliberate privately. You will be contacted with the outcome. Mark looked around the room, waiting for anyone to defend him. No one moved. His chair scraped the floor as he stood. As the door closed behind him, Danielle let out the breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding. This wasn't over, but the silence had cracked, and the truth had entered the room. The door clicked shut behind Mark, but the tension he left behind stayed in the air like smoke. No one moved at first. Then the lawyer, a woman with sharp eyes and a calm voice, stood and approached the screen. We'll begin now, she said. The next hour unfolded with the precision of a trial, slide after slide, email after email. Danielle sat still, hands folded, her face unreadable. Monica was on video from another room, eyes focused, jaw set. The lawyer guided the room through everything. No drama, no raised voice, just the truth. This email, sent from Mark Ellis to a department lead on February 12, 2021, she began. References an employee as, quote, not aligned with our front-facing brand. She turned to the board. That employee had received a performance bonus 2 weeks prior, and was black. Click. This chart, she said, displays terminations over a 5-year span. 78 employees let go. Of those, over 75% were either people of color or women. When asked for justification, all were cited for soft skill issues, terms like energy mismatch, not collaborative, or cultural misfit. She let the numbers hang. Click. A memo from Mark appeared next. The subject line read, Team Optimization Proposal. One line was highlighted. Remove low-impact staff who aren't syncing with department culture, especially those who push back too much. A board member leaned forward. This was approved. The lawyer nodded, and implemented within 3 weeks. Mark's voice echoed suddenly, recorded audio from a staff meeting Monica had quietly captured. He was laughing. These people think because they smile and show up on time they're safe. This is a business, not a charity. No one laughed now. The lead board member cleared his throat. These documents, they've all been verified. Yes, the lawyer said, without hesitation. Cross-checked with system logs, email servers, HR databases. The timeline aligns. The language repeats. The outcomes are consistent. This wasn't accidental. Danielle's heart beat steadily in her chest. She had read every word of that file, had memorized the dates, knew every name, every story, and now, the board knew them too. A soft voice broke the silence. It was one of the senior board members. Why didn't we see this? The lawyer's reply was quiet but damning. Because no one wanted to. Click. The final slide held just 3 lines. Complaint filed, ignored. Concerns raised, dismissed. Voices silenced. Repeatedly. No one looked at Danielle. They didn't need to. The evidence had spoken for her. And this time they were listening. The room was quieter than it had been all morning. Not silent, just still. The kind of stillness that settles in when people realize the ground beneath them has shifted. One by one, the board members leaned back in their chairs, their eyes lingering on the screen, the documents, the numbers. Nobody reached for their water bottles. Nobody reached for their phones. The weight of what they'd just seen pressed into the walls. Then came the questions. How many complaints were erased? Who signed off on the termination language? Were these employees ever given legal recourse? The lawyer answered each one calmly, methodically. Dates, names, audit trails. Every thread Mark Ellis thought he'd buried was now unraveling in real time. A few board members exchanged glances, sharp, quiet ones. Others shifted in their seats. The same ones who used to laugh at Mark's jokes now looked anywhere but at the head of the table where he'd always sat. Danielle said nothing. She didn't need to. They were doing what they should have done years ago. Looking and seeing. The chairman, a man who had once praised Mark for his efficiency, tapped his pen against the table and finally spoke. "I think we know what we have to do." A formal motion was made. The lawyer laid out the grounds for immediate dismissal: violation of internal policy, ethical misconduct, and suppression of legal complaints. Those in favor of terminating Mark Ellis from his position effective immediately, the chairman asked. Eyes sweeping the room. Hands went up, one after another. No hesitation, no caveats. Danielle watched, her breath steady. When the last hand rose, the chairman nodded. Motion passed. It wasn't even close. The door opened a few moments later. Mark stepped back in, still holding the same smug expression, but it didn't last. The chairman stood. "Mark, the board has voted to terminate your employment, effective immediately." Mark froze. "You're kidding." "No," the lawyer said, folding her file. "Your access will be revoked within the hour. Security is waiting outside to escort you from the premises." His voice rose. "You're firing me, based on her word." "No," the chairman said. "We're firing you based on yours." Mark's face turned pale, then red. He looked around the room for an ally. There were none. No one spoke. Security arrived a minute later. Mark opened his mouth again, but the lawyer held up a hand. "You've said enough." He was gone within minutes. The door clicked shut behind him, and just like that the air changed. No one clapped, no one cheered, but the silence wasn't heavy anymore. It was clean, clear, the kind that comes just after a storm ends, and just before something better begins. The offer came the next morning, an email, formal, polished, everything spelled out in legal language that tried too hard to sound warm. "We'd be honored to have you return. Same title, same pay, full back pay for missed time." Danielle read it twice. Then she closed the laptop. She wasn't angry. Not anymore. That had burned out weeks ago, replaced by something colder, something stronger, a kind of clarity that didn't need revenge, just truth. At noon she stood at the same building that had once turned its back on her. This time, not with a box in her arms, but with a microphone. The press had gathered outside. A small crowd of former co-workers stood to the side, unsure whether to wave or look away. The board sat behind her quietly, as if aware this moment didn't belong to them. She adjusted the mic and began. "I'm not here today because I lost a job," she said. "I'm here because I refused to lose my voice." Her tone wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. "I was told I didn't fit, that I made others uncomfortable, that I was too quiet, too careful, too much or not enough, depending on the day." She paused. "What they didn't realize was that I was watching, listening, and remembering." Cameras clicked. A breeze moved through the courtyard, light but certain. For years the systems in place protected the powerful and erased the rest. And people like me, we internalized it. We assumed we had to work twice as hard, speak half as much, and take whatever was handed to us. A few heads nodded from the crowd. But silence has a cost, and that cost is dignity. She took a breath. "I won't be returning to my old position. I've been offered it, and I appreciate the gesture. But going back would mean returning to something that never truly saw me. I don't want a seat at a broken table. I want to help build a better one." She looked up, into the lenses, into the crowd, into the eyes of anyone who had ever felt what she had. "This isn't about punishment. It's about accountability. It's about what happens when people stop whispering and start telling the truth out loud." The crowd didn't erupt. There were no cheers, no dramatic crescendos, just a quiet, steady round of applause that grew from the back row forward, unrushed, genuine. Danielle stepped away from the mic, her spine tall, her shoulders unshaken. The woman they once dismissed had just rewritten the ending, not for revenge, but for every voice that had stayed silent too long, and every one that would never again need to. The building looked the same. Same glass walls, same polished floors, same elevator chime that rang every time the doors opened on the executive level. But inside, everything was different. The audit began quietly. A third-party firm, no internal bias, no redacted memos, swept through policies, emails, hiring records. What they uncovered didn't surprise Danielle or Monica, but it jolted the board. Workshops were scheduled, not the surface-level ones with buzzwords and donuts in the break room, real ones, led by people who had lived what the slides used to gloss over, the kind that asked hard questions and waited for real answers. Monica was promoted. Her new title, Director of Ethical Compliance. Her office overlooked the same street she used to walk each morning, wondering how long she could stay. Now, her desk had a framed quote Danielle gave her, "Do no harm, take no silence." She took the job seriously. Every complaint got logged. Every voice got a response. One morning, Monica paused at her inbox, then opened a new folder on the server, Voices Reclaimed. Inside, she uploaded the anonymous testimonies that had once only existed in a hidden folder. They stayed there, not buried, not erased. Danielle didn't return to corporate life. She didn't need to. Instead, she opened the doors of her non-profit, Second Sound, a space where wrongfully terminated employees could come with their stories, their fears, and their questions. She offered legal support, counseling referrals, workshops on workplace rights. But more than anything, she offered what so many had lost, validation. Within months, Second Sound had over 300 members, former teachers, nurses, developers, cashiers, people who had been told in boardrooms, break rooms and back hallways that they were too much or not enough. Danielle greeted each of them with the same quiet strength that once steadied her own voice. The company, once a symbol of sleek indifference, started to shift. Leadership reviews became annual. Hiring panels diversified. Interns now shadowed HR compliance, not just finance and sales. It wasn't perfect. Change never is. But it was real. And most days, that was enough. On a rainy Tuesday, Danielle walked past the building again. No press, no statement, just her, and the umbrella, and the street she used to cross with a box in her arms. She didn't stop. She didn't need to. The silence that once suffocated the halls had been broken, not with shouting, not with revenge, but with facts, with truth, with two women who decided that being quiet didn't mean being powerless. The story wasn't just about one firing anymore. It was about a culture forced to reckon with what it allowed, and the people who finally made it listen. If you've ever been overlooked, unheard, or dismissed, let this remind you, silence isn't weakness. It's a pause before the truth is spoken. Share this story. Tell your own. And if you believe in accountability over silence, don't forget to like, comment and subscribe for more stories that reveal what power really looks like when it speaks quietly, but carries evidence.